Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing What Would Frida Do? A Guide to Living Boldly by Arianna Davis. As a brief disclaimer, I would like to thank Seal Press for sending me the copy of the book to review as part of their Seal Press Ambassadors program, but this video is not monetarily sponsored in any way. What Would Frida Do is a book that discusses the life of cultural icon and artist Frida Kahlo. The book follows a format of each chapter having a different theme or topic, with a bit of biographical information about Kahlo herself to support said theme, followed by a page or two of lessons that you can infer from different events within her life as a hypothetical assessment of what would Frida do in a variety of different scenarios and instances. Themes represented within the chapters of the book include confidence, pain, creativity, style, love, heartbreak, sex, identity, friendship, and viva la vida. So overall, as the book, I do think that it would be a great resource for anybody who is interested in Frida Kahlo but doesn't have the time to invest in a ton of research about her, or like, for example, maybe a high schooler who's doing a paper about her or something like that and wants just one, you know, quick, easy to reference resource, because the book also features a ton of other information and direct quotes and things that were sourced from other texts. So it is a good kind of overall summary of a brief biography of her life. But overall, the book does have a vibe of just being a little bit underdeveloped and unfinished. The book is a quick and easy read, and while I do think that anybody in any age range would be able to read it without any issue, I do feel like the goal audience of this would be a little bit younger, you know, maybe like preteens or early teen girls. I feel like would be the prime why can I not remember the word I'm looking for? The target audience. Oof, it has been a day. But anyways, I do feel like younger teen girls are probably the target audience of the book, or at least the audience that would probably get the most relatability and benefit out of it, especially in the way that it's written. It does feature a lot of modern slang and different terms and relevancies that are very current to this like active day and age right now. But with that being considered, I do think that that may prevent the book from being relevant for more than just a few years. And there are definitely aspects of the book where the author does sound a little bit condescending when discussing modern generations. So I thought it was a little bit of a hypocrisy for it to like feel like it was targeted towards this like modern Gen Z era, but also like it was low-key making fun of them at certain points. So I thought that that was an interesting narrative choice in the self-help aspects of the book. And if I'm being honest, the book does at times feel a little bit self-aggrandizing, with the author taking a lot of authority on the assumptions and just making calls on how she thinks Frida Kahlo would feel about different things, and acts as though she has a personal authority to determine those kinds of things, and at the same time imparting a few too many personal opinions that feel just a little bit more judgmental than actually constructive or like beneficial additions to the narrative. And the author also discussed the experience of writing the book a little bit more often than I would have liked, especially for the book already not being that particularly long, and without it having a huge addition to the narrative of Kahlo herself. Especially with the particular introduction that the book has, is the author talking about, you know, just her relatability to Kahlo and her thoughts and opinions and experiences, and how she, you know, saw Kahlo throughout the process of writing the book, and this Kahlo of her mind was giving her advice and different things like that. I don't disagree with that in any way, but I do think that it wasn't the most beneficial introduction to the book. I think that that tidbit would have been a lot more beneficial as an afterword or an epilogue of sorts, but starting off the book with that narrative vibe and then just the actual information and content that we got, I don't think it was the best placement and mix. And while there was a lot of information that was featured in the book that, you know, spanned the majority of Kahlo's life, there is a lot of information that is repeated in multiple different chapters that I would have understood and appreciated had the book been a bit longer and had it had a lot more information. That would have been a really good way to make a call back to information that was relevant to the particular topic that you were discussing at the time. But as it stands, the book, I mean, it's really not that large. Like, it doesn't look particularly large, and in reading it feels even shorter. So as it stands, we really didn't need that repetition because it gave more of a vibe of redundancy than callback benefit. In reference to Kahlo's cultural influence, especially in the context of style and visual inspiration, and the overabundance of merchandise in her likeness, which the book does discuss, I would have liked, in addition to that being discussed, for there have to been a little bit more discussion on the negative aspects of that, especially like in reference to the irony that Kahlo was very anti-capitalist and now her image is a touristic staple. I think that would have been fun to have discussed a little bit, while the abundance of merchandise with her likeness is brought up and mentioned within the book. It's mentioned as more of a positive thing, which, like, one, I don't want to negate that fact. It is absolutely fantastic that we have this visual icon as an artist, as a Latina individual, as somebody with disability and who is associated with the queer community. I think it's absolutely fantastic that we do have Kahlo as this cultural icon, but I do think that they could have gone a little bit more in detail about how that's not necessarily what Kahlo probably would have wanted. Like, she's known to have been kind of into herself, so I do think she'd appreciate being this cultural icon, but I don't, if I'm gonna go ahead and make my own assumptions, I feel like having her image used as items that end up being more, you know, cheesy or stereotypical, or just, you know, these touristic items versus like people actually appreciating the historical and cultural impact behind her as a person, I don't think is the best route, and I think that that should have been addressed a little bit, especially in the context of the discussion of what is cultural appropriation versus what isn't. I think that is a topic that should have been addressed as well, especially in relation to Kahlo. I feel like that line is very blurred and very hard to grasp for a lot of people. I even, you know, tried to do a little bit of research to figure out, you know, what in relation to Kahlo and replicating her image is considered appreciation versus appropriation. And I ended up having to have an actual conversation with a Latina friend of mine, which I will go into a little bit more detail later because that does have some relevancy. But before I bring that up, I do have one other main point that I wanted to discuss. And that is the topic of Frida Kahlo and her infamous relationship with Diego Rivera, another famed artist at the time. And I think that just about anybody who is familiar with any aspects of their relationship would agree that it's toxic at best and abusive at worst, with them both having this blind codependence, but while also having a series of affairs and participating in different things that they know would hurt the other, particularly on Diego Rivera's end, but at the end of the relationship, it was mutually done by both parties. There was a lot of problematic elements about their relationship. There were also, you know, some positives, and at the end of the day, both parties, you know, Kahlo and Rivera, as far as anybody is aware, always claimed to be happy and in love with each other. And so, you know, that at the end of the day is a very important thing to factor in. But hearing about it from a third party and other people, I think just about anybody can agree that there are, you know, toxic and problematic elements to it that aren't necessarily role model material. But the book felt a lot of the time like it was glorifying their relationship. And while there are definitely, like I said, different aspects that are, you know, positives, I think that there's a big difference between appreciating relatability as other humans who exist in this human world. You know, we're all people. We don't always make the best judgment calls. Sometimes we do things that aren't, you know, exactly healthy or beneficial to us. There's a fine line between that and glorifying and promoting toxic and problematic behaviors. And I do think that the book kind of tap danced all across that line. So that was an element that I wasn't necessarily the most comfortable with, especially with the book feeling like it is written for a little bit of a younger audience. Obviously, the younger the audience is, the more impressionable they are to the media that they're consuming. So that was an element that didn't entirely sit right with me. I don't think it was to an extent where it's like truly a major issue. It is just something that I wanted to bring up and, you know, leave the idea that like it is fantastic to appreciate the humanity and the relatability of different historical icons, but you are allowed to want to do better for yourself as well. But with that being said, I did want to backtrack a little bit in reference to my conversation with a Latina friend of mine. Well, to be fair, it was a conversation within my main friend group, but I'm specifically referencing Elio's input and opinions because they are actually a member of the Latina community and are Mexican themselves, which is the same identity that Kahlo is of. But I was talking to Elio because I, as a content creator, enjoy dressing up thematically for my book reviews when possible to add a little bit of a visual element to the videos. And sometimes that does go a little bit into more costume-like and cosplay territory. And I wanted to try and find a balance of being able to dress in a way that was appreciative of the artistic nature of Kahlo without being culturally appropriative. That was what the discussion started as, and going back and forth over like what's acceptable versus what's not, and you know, what is considered more appreciation versus appropriation. But then the conversation changed vibes a little bit when Elio added the direct input, "Final suggestion, don't refer to her in your review by just her first name. That's a trend that I see a lot with people of color historical figures that get demoted through only being referred to by their first name, but you wouldn't call a US president by his first name." And at that addition, I was kind of just like, all right, VHS rewind sound, like let's backtrack a little bit, because this book almost exclusively refers to Kahlo by her first name and does so in a very firsthand, almost like the author is acting as though she is a friend of Kahlo, and just has a very casual, friendly narrative voice when discussing Kahlo. So I brought that up and I was like, if that's the case, and if there's this trend of people referring to historical people of color on that first name basis, and if that is considered to be a demotion or a sign of disrespect, then where does that leave this book, you know? And we had a brief conversation about it and kind of settled on the idea that that element does feel a little bit icky. From my point of view, at least, I objectively can tell that this book was not meant to be disrespectful in any way. You can tell with every page that this author has a deep admiration and love for Kahlo, but that may have gotten the best of her and made the book step into a territory that could potentially be seen as disrespectful. That is something that I did want to bring up because that's a very, very valid argument and point to have made. And I do think that anybody who's interested in the book should be aware that that is the nature of this particular book, so that if you're going to read it for yourself, know that if you yourself are going to reference Kahlo, if you're writing any papers about her or anything like that, to have a little bit more respect and definitely take the more academic route and either refer to her full name as Frida Kahlo or last name as Kahlo, but don't necessarily go and be referring to her as Frida, because that is a little bit disrespectful and is a little bit of an instance of erasure of her as being a historical and cultural figure. But again, I myself am not an authority on the matter because I am not a person of color, and I am not somebody who studies anything like historical figures or things like that on a regular basis. So I'm not somebody who has much to add to that, but I did want to bring it up just as a bit of transparency, and because my conversation with Elio definitely changed my opinion of the book a little bit. Again, on a personal level at least, I don't think it was meant to be disrespectful in any way, but it could definitely be interpreted as such. And while I do have a ton of opinions about the book, and especially the context and content, at the end of the day, it is a well-written book, and it is fantastic that we are getting to see more representation of different Latina historical and cultural figures, especially on a more widespread scale. I do think that this is fantastic information to be able to have access to, especially for a variety of different age ranges who are looking for themselves within other people and want that element of relatability. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.